Lushes. We're your hosts, Megan and Samantha.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we're going to be discussing the book We Are Legion, We Are Bob, written by Dennis E. Taylor, who is joining us today to talk about the book, which is the first book in the Bobiverse series.
Did you say Bobiverse?
The Bobiverse, yeah.
It just sounded funny when you said that.
And so our drink episode is up on our YouTube account. We created a midnight martini. In the book, Bob is AI, right? He doesn't drink, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat, he doesn't poop, nothing.
No.
But he always has a handy dandy coffee in hand. So our drink of choice is the Midnight Martini, which is a coffee-based martini. And It's called a Midnight Martini, so it mixes space and coffee, and it's perfect if you like coffee.
It's definitely very coffee-esque and coffee-like. So if you are a coffee drinker, it is probably going to be one of your favorite drinks that we make. If you're not a coffee drinker like myself, it might be a little hard to swallow.
You might die. So I enjoyed it. Megan did not.
I switched to whiskey.
So please let us know what you think with the hashtag LitLushPodcast. And like we said, we are here today with Dennis E. Taylor. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
So the book, We Are Legion, We Are Bob, it came heavily recommended by my brother, Zach. He's been mentioning it to me and I kept forgetting the name. And then finally he's like, We Are Legion, We Are Bob. And I read it and I'm so glad I did. So
yes.
Thank you, Zach, for that.
Thank you, Zach, so much because it was really, really good. And I loved it a lot. The sci-fi was it was awesome.
Megan's husband, Ray, was actually extremely excited that she read a sci-fi book because that's not usually her genre of choice.
No.
I like sci-fi fantasy.
He saw it on the coffee table and he was like, oh, you're going to be reading this? I'm like, yeah. So now you can listen to my podcast because you actually want to read something we're reading. So he was very excited.
Yeah.
Did he start chanting one of us, one of us?
He probably did when I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. So Dennis, the book has a heavy hand in technology that gets Bob from a frozen head, essentially like Walt Disney, to being uploaded into an AI system. And I was reading this book and it doesn't seem like that far of a stretch in today's world for something like that to happen in the next century or so. So we have to know, do you have a technology or engineering background? Because neither of us do. So some of the technology, we were just like, okay. I get it, but not really.
Like, yeah, that makes sense completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a formal technology or engineering background, but I have been heavily interested in that end of things since forever, essentially. I've been a science fiction writer or reader all my life. I've been a computer programmer most of my life, and I've always read things like Scientific American and Popular Mechanics and engineering magazines and stuff like that. So this type of stuff just comes naturally, at least from a layman's point of view.
Okay. Are you also a huge Star Trek fan?
Yes.
Okay, I loved that.
She's actually wearing a Star Trek shirt right now.
I am. My house is divided. My husband loves Star Wars and I love Star Trek, but as of late, he's starting to come more to the Star Trek side. So I'm very excited.
You have cookies.
I do, but that's Star Wars. Anyways, so like as I was reading this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get all these references. This is great. And so I can't wait till he reads it. And then I'm gonna be like, look, more Star Trek stuff. Yay. So I appreciated that from another Trekkie.
From one Trekkie to another.
Yeah, that you put Star Trek over Star Wars.
Well, I am more of a Star Trek than Star Wars fan. I definitely will admit that. But the thing about sticking all the Star Wars and Star Trek and other references in there, it wasn't necessary for the plot in the same way that, for instance, the references in Ready Player One were necessary. But I wanted Bob to be a normal kind of person that you could identify with if you were a typical science fiction reader. And your typical science fiction reader probably makes one or two Star Trek references every minute. So it made sense.
Yes, right? Absolutely.
And Ready Player One, I love that book. It's such a great book. So Dennis, going back to the technology, how did you decide the technological timeline to get Bob to where he needed to be? And why not just quote unquote wave your hand like you refer to throughout the book to essentially skip over the details of how that happened?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I personally think that I was waving my hands a lot in the book. The the first version, the version that I submitted to my soon-to-be agent, was a lot more tech-heavy and did a lot more exposition. But that is a sort of an amateur writer tendency, and my editor kicked it out of me. So the book, as published, is a lot less tech-heavy, has a lot less details, and is a lot more hand-wavy. Um, But because I started out with all the technical details in there, I was able to cut things out from the least relevant on up and leave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I cut out just enough to please the editor and not one bit.
That happy medium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
definitely really cool to see kind of the behind the scenes, and even each Bob creating their own VR. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Did you have a list of Bobs and a list of like possible VRs and kind of match them, or was it made up on the fly of this will be this Bob iteration's personality trait and this will be the matching VR?
That was done on the fly. The interesting thing about the personality changes was that was recommended by my agent when he was still shopping the book around. Initially, I essentially had the Bobs all the same kind of personality. Of course, they would diverge as their experiences uh, diverged, but they all started out as basically the same person. But Ethan said that in order to have a little more tension, they needed to have differing opinions on things. So I started sticking in different personalities, small at first, and it worked.
Yeah, it definitely made the story more interesting because,
Yeah.
like you said, they are essentially the same person, but
But
like
just
there's a dominant trait that's different in
right.
each of them. And I laughed really hard when you introduced Homer, and I was like,
Yes.
oh, I immediately went to Homer Simpson and then read a little bit further, and I'm like, oh, his avatar
It is
is
Homer
Homer
Simpson.
Simpson. So, and Bert and Ernie at the end as the carrier vessels, I thought that was really cute.
I liked how number 2 was Riker.
Yeah.
I sat there and laughed for like a good couple of minutes, and I was like, "That's awesome."
Along that vein, I guess, with the different iterations of Bob, early on in the book, there's a heavy discussion between Bob and Dr. Landers about the danger of consciousness as it relates to a human who is interfaced into an AI system, especially when they have, I guess, downtime
Right.
to do nothing but reflect on the fact that they are now an AI system. How did you come up with that idea?
Again, the book needed more uh, conflict in that area, so I had to add competition for Bob, the other four AI characters, and I needed a reason for them to be taken out of the running. It's uh, it's hard to avoid cliches when you're writing, and if you lean too heavily on something like the chosen one trope, it can come off amateur. So I was always trying to come up with a good plausible reason for this or that thing to happen. Um, Insanity seemed reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can imagine one day just waking up and then they're like, "Yeah, we know you spent all your life savings so that you can do what you want when you get into the future, but we're going to make you work for us, and now you're a computer program."
Yeah,
So,
no surprise.
yeah.
Yeah, I was reading that and I felt like the anxiety building
Oh,
up into me like, "Oh my gosh, I think I'm having an existential crisis just reading this." Like that is something that no human as far as I know have ever experienced. So,
I did like his relationship with Dr. Landers, and I did get a little sad when he died. Spoiler alert. And then I also found it funny that Bob, snuck and was able to see who his other competitors were, and then came back, and then he was talking, and he was like, "Oh, I forgot the other one's name, Kevin. I think it was Kevin. He's like, "Oh, Kevin didn't make it," and he's like, yeah, "Wait," and then he's like, "Oh crap, gotta fix this, so he doesn't know that I let it slip."
Yeah,
I liked that scene. That was a good one. So.
And I thought it spoke to Bob's character that he wasn't willing to just unplug the competition. If he was going to win, he was going to win fair and square.
Right. He still had a little bit of humanity, even though he wasn't technically human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an important part of the whole thing, is that the replicants continue to act as if and believe that they are human. They have the same emotions, the same reactions as a person.
And you insinuated this a few times throughout the book, that it seems like the fact that they strive to have this seamless VR reality, even down to the physics of throwing a baseball, that helps keep them human and keep them sane, as opposed to someone like the character Henry that Linus discovers, who was just left alone in his AI void and just completely snaps.
Yeah. He even says, like, "Oh my gosh, this is what it would have been like. And I couldn't even imagine have been here this long without a VR body." And yeah, so I thought that was a neat, like, this is what could have happened had I not been able to make myself in VR. And
mm-hmm. Yeah. So was the interaction between Henry and Linus something that you had planned to portray early on, or as you were writing the book, did it seem just to come up organically that, oh, we'll have a Bob meet someone that it could have been him had he not come up with the VR, like Megan said?
Well, we briefly brought up the question of how much of the book development is organic before the recording started. And this is the part where I reluctantly admit that there's a lot more organics involved than I like to pretend. I I think of myself as a plotter, but there's a whole lot of pantsing involved in writing a book. I tend to have the overall plot arc mapped out. I know where I'm going to start. I know some of the things that are going to happen in the middle, and I know how it's going to end, more or less. But the details tend to develop as I go. In the case of the VR, I had written the book all the way to the point where Bob had cloned himself in Epsilon Eridani, and they were discussing things. And I realized that the entire book was going to be just talking heads, because they were just bodiless VRs, basically talking to each other over the radio. It is what it came down to. Visuals virtually non-existent. So I had to come up with some way to have actual visuals and have actual human level interaction. So I went back and introduced the concept of a VR as Bob was flying out of the solar system. And then once I introduced that, it started to open up other possibilities. Well, maybe it's the lack of the VR that's causing the other ones to go insane and so forth. Once that came in, then, well, what would happen if one of the replicants from another country didn't have VR? And it just, again, organically grew.
And I liked how Linus handled the whole situation, where he didn't just say, screw you, you tried to shoot me down, I'm gonna leave you. He takes Henry in and creates a whole separate VR for him.
Yes.
To the extent that Henry doesn't even know.
Right. That was a real thing.
Right.
He thinks it's all a dream.
And I have only read the first book. Do we see more of Linus and Henry in the other books in the series?
Yeah. They're never big characters, at least in terms of the trilogy. And Henry shows up in the Bender books briefly as well. He's a side character, at least for the moment. Because he was a loner of his own, or a loner, and always went off on his own. He's just continued to do that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the original Bob's involvement with the Deltons, and him trying to toe the line of being just an observer and not trying to be like the big floating godhead in the sky trying to guide this society towards advancement. But was that something that you struggled with when writing that to create that balance? Or did you kind of know in advance that this would be something that Bob struggled with and we're going to put it in the story to show how hard it would be for someone to do that?
No, I think that one went as planned. The whole prime directive thing is always something that I've found questionable in Star Trek. I know that sounds heretical, but
Well, it's like, how do you stand by and let civilization just hurt itself?
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
or even destroy itself completely. I mean, what's the
Yes.
point? But there had to be a first contact subplot of some kind in there. There just had to be. And if you're going to have that, why not have some philosophical issues to go along with it? The Delton subplot was actually one of the most controversial in the series. People, some people really hated it. Some people claimed to just completely skip over whenever they came to a Delton chapter.
Oh, that was like one of my favorite. I was like,
Yeah.
I was actually excited. I was like, oh, the original Bob. Well, not the original Bob, but like
Bob Watson.
as original as Bob could get at that point.
Alpha Bob.
Yeah, got to be the one to discover, and got to do all that interacting, and I thought that was really neat. So I actually, I guess I'm on the one side of who enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. Did they say why they didn't like the Delton Society arcs of the story?
Not really. No specific reason that I can remember. Just I think if I had to guess, I'd say that they were looking for a space exploration story, and that was exactly the opposite of one.
I enjoyed the Deltons.
Me too.
I don't know. I guess everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah, but ours is better.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, well, the thing with the Daltons, though, is that it was very much a sort of a death of a thousand cuts type of thing. Bob started out wanting to just observe, and I'll just try this little thing, and then maybe I'll just try that little thing, and the next thing he's right in there, and that's the way it goes sometimes.
I was putting myself in his position, and I was like, I don't think I could have just been a silent observer. No. I don't think I could have walked away, and I was. I was feeling nervous for the Delton Society just as he was. And I was, so I probably would have done the same thing.
I actually put myself in the other perspective of, I'm like, you know what? If there's one day that our world is like on the brink of extinction and some aliens came and were like, hey, we have medicine that can fix all this, or we have technology that can help improve all this. And, I'd be like, yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be like, no, we got this. You let us do it on our own. I'd be like, yes, I will take any wisdom you have. Give it.
Yeah, no, apparently we do not got this.
Yes.
We definitely don't.
I mean, if Colonel Buttersworth is any indication, it does not seem like we have this at all. So
that guy.
I did enjoy his name and the whole interactions with the people at Earth and the UN, and they're all on the brink of extinction, but still, even in the face of certain death, they still were not able to
come together and work as a team. And
right. And it's like a sad thought, but also probably very realistic that that's how that would go down.
And the bribing and blackmailing and just...
Mm-hmm.
No, I thought that was pretty realistic too.
One of my favorite, and I actually marked it in the book because I was like, this is awesome. Nicely marked it. Not like sat there and marked up a book. But anyways, was when Riker was talking to Minister Cranston, and Minister thought he could be like, oh, I got you. I'm going to make you, flip your switch and make you go back into, under our thumb. And he's like, protocol override for Alpha 23. And then they're sitting there for a second. And Riker's like, yeah, this is not going to go well. And then Minister Cranston, and he's like, yes, replicant. And he's like, go F yourself. I was like, yes. So, because I know he wanted to say that to them since he was programmed.
Since day one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, finally, he got the sensation to actually say what he wanted to say all along.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that by making Bob a reluctant cursor, it helped that when he did throw out an F-bomb, it was much more significant.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I grew to look forward to his acts of rebellion throughout the book, as small as they may be, or as big as they may be.
I also like that he was smart enough to know when it was appropriate to do things and when like he needed to keep his mouth shut and play along.
Right. Which leads us to our next question. When extrapolating the events in the timeline of the books, how did you manage to create believable situations with believable character responses?
Okay, in terms of, I guess it's the question about timeline that's throwing me a little bit, but I did have a flow chart going on the whole book, because especially in the first half of the book, before they have the Scud transceiver, each Bob is light years away from every other Bob, and they're doing their own thing, and proceeding at their own pace, different time scales. In fact, the heading on each chapter indicates what the Earth date would be for that particular Bob. I guess what I'd have to say is that I had to carefully flowchart things to make sure that I didn't have them do something impossible. In a couple of cases, I did discover that Bobs were reacting to something that hadn't happened yet, and that's generally bad. Interesting side note: the date of the insurrection, like when the theocrats took over the United States, I think I have it set as like 2032 in the book. I'm going by memory. I originally had it a lot closer to present time, but my editor said to me, that's not credible, that something like that could happen that quickly. You should move it another decade or two into the future.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And that was, of course, back in 2015 or so, before certain events transpired.
Right.
in the United States. I think now, if I was writing it, I would keep my original dates.
Yeah. I was actually, when I was reading that, I'm like, that seems a little further than I would have imagined, but okay.
Yeah.
So, which begs the question, and again, these days it does not seem like a far stretch, but when you were writing the book, how did you arrive at the conclusion that America would effectively be taken over by this radical Christian government and usher in an era of theocracy?
Well, if you look at American politics and listen to some of the things that have been said, it's never far below the surface. I mean, George W. Bush said that he didn't think that non-Christians should even be elected to office. And he said that as the president of the United States at the time. So it's hard to mistake that for an attitude. And there are other comments from other significant personalities in American politics that lead you to believe that there's a large percentage of the political landscape that believes that the American government should be theocratically based.
Right.
Because separation of church and state
does not exist. I can't even tell you how many city councils I've gone to where, there's just stuff that I'm like, oh, okay, so that's not a thing. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So the line's a little blurred.
Right. Like when you hear the stories all the time now about public school kids who are forced to do some sort of prayer and don't partake, where the parents have an issue with it. And then, the parents and the kids are the ones being cast in this bad light, but it's like, oh no, it's supposed to be separate because we as a country do not have a set religion, and one is certainly not better than any of the other ones.
Right.
So it was a little scary to me because it's not
far-fetched.
No.
Right.
I was like, oh.
No.
This is sad and scary all at the same time.
Yeah. And yet, if you go over some of the comments that have been posted on my webpage, especially early on, there are people basically trashing me for having made this far-fetched scenario, and that it's ridiculous to think that this could happen. And in fact, there's one particular post where the person starts out by trashing me for thinking that the Christian religion could go in that direction, and then he continues by saying you should have used Muslims because it's completely believable that the Muslims would do it.
Did you not know anything about the Spanish Inquisition and
Yeah, I left that post up.
History in general.
I left that post up
Okay.
without comment because I think it speaks for itself.
Right.
And the fact that a religion could take over a government, it happens all the time throughout history, all over the world, all different sorts of religions. So just in that vacuum alone, even without any specific religion, it's entirely plausible in this day and age in America, where, like you said, the past decade or so, you've been seeing these events happen across the board. To me, it's not that far-fetched at all.
No. Well, if you look at the events of the last 2 or 3 years, you can see how structurally that kind of takeover could happen with just a little more guts and a little more in terms of people already in positions of power. Somebody could conceivably completely take over the government.
I can see it.
Yeah. Now I'm Canadian, so I'm looking at all of this from the outside. We get we get our news from American and Canadian channels, and for me it's a little more of a disinterested viewpoint. So I'm kind of standing back watching it, but it's still mind-boggling.
And especially because the ramifications of what happens could potentially affect everybody else.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I just thought the way the book played it out, I thought it was like very, very believable, and I actually almost appreciated that because it wasn't like that could ever happen. It was like, okay, I could see it.
Yeah. This is our future.
This is a cautionary tale that I think we should all take to heart.
Yeah.
Obviously, in We Are Legion, it's the faith, faith group.
All the acronyms, I love it.
Yeah, the acronyms.
He's like, they love their acronyms.
Yeah, so which obviously makes me think now, was it a challenge to come up with the various acronyms in the book? I would imagine it would be a fun process to come up with.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's always a challenge. But the thing is, in my former career path, acronyms form a major part of it. I mean, in IT, everything's an acronym. Freaking everything. I mean, they make acronyms for things that don't need acronyms.
That's funny.
Right? And you're like, what does it stand for? Why not just use the real name?
Yeah. In IT, we have what's called a TLA, which is a 3-letter acronym, which is basically a recursive acronym. And it refers to, 3-letter acronyms. Just because we could.
Why not, right? It saves time,
That's
I guess.
Funny.
Yeah.
So going back to the idea of religion, which I know is a very hot topic, but do you foresee religion always being a destructive force towards scientific progress, as evidenced by the books? Or in your personal view, could you envision a more progressive form of theism in the future?
Okay, let me start by giving you my background. I was raised Catholic. I've been baptized, went to First Communion, did First Confession, Confirmation, the whole business. When I was a teenager, I switched to Protestantism, specifically Baptist Church, and I went the whole hog on that. So I have seen religion from the inside, from both a Catholic and a Baptist fundamentalist point of view. And I've become a humanist because I found it ultimately unsatisfying. But I still remember my time there, and I remember how people act within a religion. Most people are fairly normal, decent people. It's the minority that poison it for everybody else. And I'm
which is true about a lot of
yeah,
things.
yeah, it is. I mean, even with left wing and right wing political movements, it's the minority that are creating most of the trouble. The trouble
Right.
the trouble with that is that the same minority who are willing to kick up a fuss also tend to believe that the ends justify the means, and whatever is necessary to bring about their version of utopia is okay. So I think that religion will always be a destructive force to a certain extent, but then I think that politics will also be always a destructive force. So I don't think religion is special or unique in that way. It's just one other reason for people to, uh, go crazy.
Yes.
And if
Yeah.
you mix religion and politics, it's a dynamic force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually liked how they showed how politics are the same with every species with the Deltans, and how they're like, oh, look, politics are even the same everywhere. So that's, and it is. So I thought that was an interesting way to show, like, no matter what you have to fight over, like, it's just like somebody will always find something to argue with another group about.
Yeah.
It's the us and them mentality.
There's always going to be something, whether, I mean, someone might say the sky's orange, and then someone's going to be like, no, it's not. And then, yeah. Well, it was what there's one of the groups on Earth at the end that believe that we should just let humans die out. And then but we still kind of want to also be saved. I can't remember which group that was. There was quite a few of them, and I try to.
In the book, there was vehement.
Yes, that was
yes.
it.
And then, so they were like, we think that they should just all end, but make sure you save us a space too.
Yeah. Well, that was based on a real group. There's vehmt.org, and I've never been able to decide if they were serious or if they were a version of the Onion. But their stated stance is that humanity should just stop breeding and let themselves die off to save the planet.
Themselves included, I would imagine.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, well then.
I mean, they're not like entirely wrong. We are doing a number on our planet, but
it seems a little extreme.
Yeah,
just a bit.
Extreme view.
You can go a little too far.
Yeah.
So I guess along that line, also, most of the characters, i.e., different derivatives of Bob, are inherently good. And then we see some of these smaller characters, like the people from Faith, the Brazilians, some of the people in the UN that aren't good. And those characters appear to be corrupted by power. Is that a theme throughout all of your stories, or was it more of a conscious decision to portray this idealized version of humanity?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it an idealized version. The thing is, I try to be as realistic as possible. Power does tend to corrupt, and power does tend to attract those who want power. One of the tenets of philosophy, and I can't remember if it was Aristotle or someone else, but he made the point that the person who successfully achieves power is usually the last person that you want in that position, because the skill set necessary to achieve power is not the skill set that's useful for ruling. You need a different person. So as a general statement, the people who win elections are the people you least want to win elections, and that's not a good commentary on the efficiency of government.
There was something, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but my husband's like, oh, you should do this. I don't remember what it was. It was something of power. And I'm like, I wouldn't want that job. No, heck no. And he's like, that's why you would be best at it. And I'm like,
because you don't want
because
it.
I don't want it. And I'm like, I don't know. That's okay.
Yeah,
So I can see that being the same.
yeah, that's actually not an unusual trope that the person who should be in power is the person who least wants it.
Like Jon Snow from Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
for example.
I don't know if he should have had it either. He was, anyways.
Anyway.
I forgot there was something I was going to say and I completely forgot.
It's okay.
That's what whiskey will do to you.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately,
in the middle of the day.
Fortunately, we are recording this.
Yes.
There you go. Pre-recording, so we could just edit it out.
Stop.
Oh, I should have made a note. Anyways, you can go on with your next question.
Okay. So, Dennis, I wanted to ask you, as far as the consciousness goes, with relation to the Bobs. So the different iterations of the same human identity of Bob, what was your thought process? And I know we touched on it a little bit about each Bob's consciousness and identity dominant trait.
For the most part, they're just metaphorically they're greebles. They don't have a real purpose except when they cause a certain Bob to act in a certain way. For instance, Mario's excessive desire for solitary, for being on his own, forces him to fly way the heck out there, which means that he's the first person to discover something happening. And if you've only read book one, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Appreciate it. Because I do plan on reading the other two.
Yeah. Riker's enhanced sense of responsibility is what leads him to head back to the solar system to find out what's going on there and so forth. But for a lot of the Bobs, the differences in personality are just there because I've established that there will be differences in personality. However, it should be noted that this process does accelerate as you get into deeper and deeper generations, and it becomes a major theme in books 4 and 5.
Okay. It might even be like a chicken and the egg situation, but when another Bob is created, what comes first, the Bob or the personality derivative? Or is it something that just happens again organically while the story is progressing?
You mean in terms of writing? Like I say, when I need another Bob or another cohort of Bobs, I generate them because they have to go off and go to war, or they have to go off and explore this thing, or go back to Earth, whatever. And if they need a specific personality trait, as in Riker, then I stick it in. Otherwise, I don't specify. Once I've established that Bobs have different personalities, that's enough. And the reader will fill it in themselves.
Yeah, especially if it's a Bob that has a short lifespan, for lack of a better term, if they're just going to...
They're a red shirt.
Yeah, if they're a red shirt.
Yeah, or a peripheral character. In
Right.
some cases, I've just shown Bobs having different personalities by having them drinking Coke instead of coffee. It can be something as minor as that.
I actually thought of my question.
Okay.
So they bring in Bob's great niece and his other extended family. Do they play a role in the sequels of the books, or is it just kind of like we just mentioned that they're here, but he's going to stick to the idea of like, I shouldn't be too much in contact with them because I'm not
actually Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah. They continue to appear in books 2 and 3. They do ultimately affect Riker's and the Bob's attitudes towards humanity in general. They don't have a major role, as in they become generals of an invading army or anything like that. But they are a significant player in the series.
I was so worried that the whole time, like, they brought her in, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's gonna like
sabotage.
Yeah, I thought it was just like it was all like a rouge, and they were like just using her to like get him to do what he wanted, and really she worked for like
that was their.
But like she was there to do all this. Like I thought like she was the
minion.
No, I thought she actually knew what she was doing, and she was playing like, oh, they're kind of forcing me to do these things. But really it was like, no, I'm here to make you think this, so you do what we want, so you can think that my life is in danger and
give us the first ship.
Yeah. So I was just worried that there was some, hidden agenda on their side. So
there being the family or
yes, the family.
Oh,
the family.
Yeah, no. I guess I don't like portraying characters as foils, as single dimensional characters who do the obvious stupid thing just to move the plot along. So Julia would have known why she was being brought forward. Riker would have known why she was being brought forward, and in fact, Cranston basically admitted it in the book. He said, "Yeah, we all know what's going on here. Let's just roll with it."
Yeah.
I have my priorities. You have your priorities. Hopefully, now they'll align a little better.
I enjoyed the random touches on family throughout the book. So in the beginning, you establish that the original human Bob was very close to his sisters. When he wakes up and he turns off the
receptor,
The endocrine system.
Yeah, yes, thank you. And he has a second, I guess, in his time frame to grieve the loss of his family. And then we see it again with Julia. I did enjoy those family ties. I also enjoyed the fact that the story didn't get bogged down with his ex-girlfriend too much.
I was like, okay.
And that the first chapter of the book was all the backstory you needed, and then boom, he wakes up and we're in the future and
the baggage is gone.
Yes.
Well, more or less, but
yeah, but it still affects him.
Right.
So Dennis has I don't think it has, but has this We Are Legion book or any of the books in the series been turned into a movie? Are there plans to turn it into a movie? Because I think it'd be a great movie.
I do too.
Well, I have signed an option agreement with a production company or a development company. I'm not sure how they categorize themselves. The whole business, the whole movie and TV and series business is really complex and incestuous and crazy. But basically, you sign an option agreement, and they have 18 months to find a backer or a production company or something. And if they do, then you enter into an actual production agreement with them, and more money's involved and stuff like that. And at the end of the 18 months, they have an option, in my case anyway, of renewing the option agreement for another 18 months or not, or just dropping it. I think it was signed September 2018, somewhere around there. So I have another 6 months to go on it. And nothing's been signed yet. Nothing's been agreed to. So it could just expire, or or they could renew it, or they could wait until the very last freaking minute. As the counter is counting down to 4, 3, 2, we have something.
Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed because I would love to see this into a movie trilogy.
Yeah.
As I was reading it, I was trying to think of like who I could picture as Bob, because they'd have to have a wide range to portray all the different Bobs, but the same Bob at the same time. And one of my original thoughts was like Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, really? That is not who.
Just because I could picture him, because a lot of the Bobs seem to have that dry humor, snarky aspect, and I was like, I could see that.
I agree with that. I think Ryan Reynolds has the right sense of humor for it. The breaking the fourth wall, the absolutely acerbic comment on just about everything, even when it's otherwise serious.
Right.
I'll play the extra on that show, or on that movie. Leading role.
Yeah.
Make him have a love interest. I'll be another VR love interest for him.
I'll gladly be Jeeves, who just hands the coffee off.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it would be great if they could actually get Oh, my mind just went blank. What's his name? Monty Python. The person the characters or the Jeeves looks like. Yeah, Jeeves is supposed to look like the Monty Python actor. Yeah, that's it. I'll think of it as soon as we hang up. But
John
John
Cleese?
Cleese, there you go. That's it. Yeah, it would be wonderful to get John Cleese to actually play him.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. We were talking in our last episode that we inherently, at least I do, when I'm reading a book, I as I'm reading and learning about the characters, if I don't put myself in the character's perspective, I imagine celebrities or people I know as them, and so that's kind of what I was thinking
Right.
for Bob was Ryan Reynolds, but John Cleese would be a great Chiefs.
Yes.
And Guppy is Akbar, so that's done, obviously.
Yeah.
Which made me laugh probably a little bit too hard.
I loved it. And I every time he said Guppy, I just saw Admiral Akbar right there.
But I imagine like really googly eyes, that you use for like arts and crafts. I don't know why, but that's kind of just what I imagine.
Well,
and how Guppy gets snarky as time goes on as well.
I loved that.
If you listen to the audiobook instead of reading the text book, Ray Porter does a spot on Admiral Akbar voice for that. And it's just absolutely deadly.
I'm gonna have to download.
I know, right?
Now you've piqued my interest. I'm gonna have to look into it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when I talked to Ray, talked by email before he started on the Bobiverse production, and he asked me some questions, like how do you visualize certain characters and stuff like that. I told him that I visualized Butterworth as Fowler from Chicken Run. I don't know if you've ever seen Chicken Run, and he nailed that too.
Sorry, Dennis, I don't know if you heard that. My dog is wearing the cone of shame, and he likes to bump into things as often as possible.
He's just adding his own editorial comment.
Yes, exactly.
He's in, I think, in every podcast and every video we do. His jingling of his collar is in everything.
Yeah.
Or my other dog barks. They're not very well behaved. I try, but So Dennis, is there anything else about We Are Legion or the Bobiverse that we didn't touch on that you want to make known to the world? And by the world, I mean our listeners, and one day the world.
Yeah. Well, books 4 and 5 are currently. I'm madly writing away.
Awesome.
I'm this close. Holds up fingers this much apart. Literally, I should. Well, I've learned to be very careful about making predictions because apparently my predictions suck. I originally thought I'd be done by the end of the summer. Then I thought it'd be the end of September. Now I'm saying the end of October, but it is that close in terms of writing. Then of course you have to go through the beta reader and the production and crap like that. So that'll probably.
And that's for books 4 and 5.
Yeah, it's a duology. It's a 2-book story.
Oh, cool.
It's called. Working title is The Search for Bender, and I think you will understand the title by the end of book 3.
Okay. I'm sure Zach will understand and he'll be like so excited.
Oh, my brother, he like lost his mind when I was like, I love the book. And by the way, we're interviewing with Dennis. He's like, oh my God, no way. So a lot of the questions we asked you, actually, he sent me because he was like, I have so many questions that I want to ask him. I'm like, send them to me. I would love to know.
Cool.
He's such a fanboy.
I know he is. So I know you said that your predictions are bad. Do you have, I guess, a prediction for how many books will be in the series ultimately, or is it kind of just rolling with it?
I'm just rolling with it. I have no trouble coming up with ideas. I have a list of book ideas, not just Bobiverse stuff, but in general that's got more than 100 items on it.
Awesome.
It just becomes a question of what I write next.
Well, cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
I'm going to go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble and get the other couple books that are out because I'm excited to read them.
Yeah. Yes.
So besides books 4 and 5, are there any other upcoming projects that you want to talk about? I know you said you have list of 100 topics. Anything else in the works?
Well, immediately after finishing the Bender books, I'm going to go back to writing the sequel to Outland, which I call Earthside. That's been in the works for, I don't know, 3 years now. Um, I started to write the sequel to Outland, and then I switched to We Are Legion, and I never went back to Earthside. So I've got to get that done because now I have a contract.
Okay.
Very nice. And, contracts help set a fire under your butt sometimes. Yeah. I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. We're going to keep our fingers and toes crossed for you, especially with the 18-month agreement.
Yes.
Hopefully something clicks for you, whether it be soon or at the stroke of midnight, or even if they renew the contract. I'm looking forward to a future We Are Legion book. Not book. I read the book. Movie, TV show, something.
How much coffee or the
coffee martini? Not much, actually, but I had coffee this morning, so I'm already a little bit wired.
Well, Dennis, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it a lot, and it was a great conversation. You're more than welcome to come back and join us, whether it's to talk about a new book or if there was a book that we read that you wanted to have a discussion with us about, you are more than welcome to join us.
Yeah, we would love to have you back anytime to talk more about the Bobs and all of the shenanigans that they get into.
Yes.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
So thank you, Dennis, for joining us. We had a blast with you on.
Now on to our Conscious Corner.
Yes.
And today is not so much a theme as just a commentary.
Yep.
So a friend of mine that I met, oh God, so long ago, probably almost like a decade ago at this point, I met her actually on Birthright Israel, fellow half Jews. She lives in Hawaii, and she is getting married soon, and her fiance's family owns a farm, and they are doing the hashtag debt-free wedding. And to raise money for their wedding, they have been selling stuff that they make on their farm. So they were selling like kimchi a while back, and I wanted to buy some, but I didn't think kimchi would probably ship very well from Hawaii to Florida.
Right.
So she posted the other day that they were doing homemade deer jerky.
Ooh.
And I don't eat venison, but Mike does. So
yeah.
I went ahead and bought 3 bags. And it's Fukushima Family Farms. And we got it the other day, and Mike says it's delicious. So Serena, thank you for that. It smells really good.
I'll take some to my husband.
Yeah.
He'll enjoy that a lot.
Know what you think?
Yeah.
And I posted it on my Instagram, and I was like, oh, thanks for the jerky. And my cousin was like, Fukushima as in like the nuclear bomb? And I'm like, no. As in like my friend's fiance's last name. And she's like, oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Like, no, we're not eating radioactive jerky. Thank you.
That would be gross.
Yeah, but it smells really good. It's all natural. And I am fully behind the hashtag debt-free wedding.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking of it, I actually think my wedding was debt-free.
Nice.
We also ran away. So
perfect. I was, for a second, I thought you meant like you literally ran. Like you
no.
I don't understand. I mean, that I meant I got it.
Yeah, we told people, so it's not technically eloping, but it really was just him and I that got married. With no one around, no one to marry us. It was very.
You did have a witness, right?
No, we didn't have to have a witness either.
Wait, really?
Really? Huh. No one to marry us, no witnesses. It really was just Ray and I by the creek.
Did it happen?
Yes, it did. I know Mom's always like, that's not legal. I'm like, well, we signed the paperwork and paid the $30 and then walked our happy little butts down to the creek while it was -4 degrees and snowing. And we said our things. I set up my tripod and...
Wait, where were you that it was -4 degrees?
Beaver Creek, Colorado.
Oh, how appropriate that you guys were at Beaver Creek. Ray planned that, didn't he?
He did. So, a friend of Ray's let us stay at their timeshare for a week for free.
Oh, nice.
So the only thing we really had to pay for was the flights there and back, and then the van ride from the airport to where we were staying, and then we walked everywhere, and then any food we did, and then snowboarding and ice skating and stuff. But it was definitely debt free. So I highly recommend #debt-free weddings because
debt-free wedding.
yeah, I couldn't imagine making payments after the wedding on your wedding.
It's crazy that the average cost of the wedding is more than like most people make in a year.
Yeah.
And I'm from New Jersey, and which we've established. Like,
yes.
It's like beating a dead horse at this point. But
where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey. And the wedding culture up there is so different than Florida. And the weddings are crazy over the top. My boyfriend Mike and I, we went to one of my cousin's weddings, and his mouth just like dropped when he walked into that wedding. And he's like, this is what your family does for weddings. I'm like, yeah, it's a Jersey thing.
Here it's like, okay, we're going to get married at the beach, and we're going to find a spot, and we're going to send our friends over early to make sure that no one sits in our spots.
You don't even have to wear shoes.
Yep.
Perfect. My friend actually from law school, they did a brunch wedding, and that was really nice. Yeah, it was on the beach. They got married, and then the cocktail hour, we had like delicious mimosas and stuff.
Aww.
And then the food was brunch food, so it was great. You had like your
and that would cut the cost back a lot.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. So thank you, Angie. She supplied flip flops for all of the ladies so that we would be comfy. But that was really fun because then you could go and you could eat and drink and then take a nice little nap.
Right.
A little snoozer, and then wake up for the after party at like 4 p.m. and then still be in bed by like 10. So it was like perfect.
Honest to God, Ray and I, that's originally when we were thinking about doing a wedding. It was, let's do we were going to do a beach wedding, and it was going to be just after sunrise. And we were going to go to the park across the street and do like a brunch kind of thing as well. We weren't going to have any drinks because it was like a state park and you can't have alcohol, but
I mean, you can, but you're not supposed to.
So it was just going to be like a quick little thing. And then we were just going to go and, like you said, after party it up afterwards. But then we were like, you know what?
Fuck everybody.
I was like, I don't want to be in front of people. And if I'm spending that kind of money, I want it to be like, so we had like a destination wedding, but we didn't want anyone there. We're like, we want it to be just about us. And
party of two, destination honeymoon wedding.
Yes.
All in one.
Yes. And it worked perfectly for us. I mean, there are days where I'm like, I wish I had a wedding dress to try on. But then I'm like, those things are expensive. I mean, you can still get some pretty inexpensive ones.
I guess it just depends on where your priorities are, right?
Yeah.
And what your tastes are. I have another friend, couple friend from law school, my brain. And they got married in a state park, and we wanted to go really bad, but it was one of the parks in Nevada, and it was like wedged between like my other cousin's wedding and a bunch of other stuff, and we couldn't swing it, but their pictures looked beautiful, and she's wearing this like cute white dress, and I think like hiking boots because they had to like hike there, and a couple of our friends from law school went, and I'm pretty sure that was a #debt-free wedding as well.
That's the way to do it.
I am fully behind it, especially when you have #student loans. So,
and then you want to also buy a house together, and then you're gonna have all that fun stuff in the cars, and if you have kids, and you got all those stuff coming up, and so if you can start out, so if you can, death is expensive too.
That too.
So if you can start out your marriage debt free in that sense, that's a great way to do it. And by all means, do what you got to do. Sell deer jerky.
Hell yeah. So shout out to Fukushima Farms for the delicious deer jerky. And #debt-free wedding.
Yes. So now that our conscious corner is over, we're going to go ahead and mention our next book is Deck Z, The Titanic, Unsinkable, Undead by Chris Pauls and Matt
Solomon.
I said it fine. Gosh darn it. I said it fine like 8 times, like, oh yeah, Solomon. And then of course the second it's saying recording, I'm like, no. Oh, I was doing so good. But anyways.
Okay. Yes, so Deck Z by Chris Pauls and Matt Solomon. It was recommended to us by my boyfriend Mike, so if it sucks, you can blame him. Just kidding. I've actually been wanting to read this book for a while. And apparently, spoiler alert, the ship sinks. Titanic. So
How dare you ruin it?
No, there's no
I
point
had
in
no
reading the book,
idea.
guys. Just, that's it. Done. But yeah, it looks interesting. I mean, I love zombies.
Yeah, I'm very excited to read it. And also we will be, if you haven't seen it already, we are posting up our book list for the rest of the 2019 year.
Yes.
So if there's something, if you're one of those people who need a little more time to read a book, you have the list ahead of time that you can go ahead and start reading the ones that tickle your fancy.
Also with the tentative episode dates, so you can plan accordingly. The Deck Z episode is going to go up on Halloween, which is October 31st for people who don't know.
If you don't know.
Well, we may have some international listeners who
Oh,
are
that's a good
familiar with
point.
Halloween. Yeah.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah.
They should come over and experience.
We were looking at our listener stats, and it looks like we had a play from the Philippines. So if you are in the Philippines and are our one listener, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you think. And on our Halloween episode also, it will be our first author spotlight segment.
In keeping with the acronyms.
Yes, which stands for ASS. So we may or may not keep that. And we already recorded that session, and it dawned on me as we were recording that the acronym is ASS. So better name to be determined.
Yeah.
But it'll be with Jason Gwynn. And he has a couple books out. He actually created a Spotify playlist for his book called The Wretched, which is what we're talking to him about. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Obviously a drink episode also will be going up for Deck Z, drink to be determined. We need some time to let inspiration strike.
Yes.
We appreciate that you guys are listening to us, watching our drink videos,
subscribing to our drink videos on YouTube, subscribe to our podcasts on whichever way you listen to us.
Yeah, any platform. And please share the show, tweet about the show, tell your friends and family about the show. And
let us know what kind of merchandise you guys would like to see coming up here soon for you to purchase, whether it's mugs, cups, shirts, hats, bookmarkers,
koozies,
whichever.
Tote bags, edible panties. Just kidding.
Oh
weird.
My.
I mean, going with the ASS acronym, right? Why not?
Oh, yeah.
And please let us know what you think about the show with the hashtag #LitLushPodcast, because we love to know what you guys think. If you know of an author, or if you are an author who's a fledgling author, up-and-coming author, just publish your first book, have a couple books out that you want a platform to share about, let us know. Yes. And we're planning on doing that every couple episodes.
Yeah, I think quarterly-ish
or something. Yeah, so please let us know. And I think that'll do it for us here today.
Yep. So as always, stay lively with your libations.